What is going on, boys and girls of YouTube? I'm getting in on this grind, all right? I've been slacking, I'll admit it. So I'm going through, and honestly, I'm cranking out videos for all the questions that I get asked just over and over and over again, because I understand if I answer it on stream, not everyone will hear it. If I answer a YouTube video and not everyone will see it. So hopefully just having this here as a reference for someone to search or to come over to the stream, me to send them here. That's gonna be the goal of these videos. So for today, I'm covering counter building, because there is a huge misconception that because this is a MOBA and because there's a ton of items in the game, you counter build every game. And that's just simply not the case. There are cases with counter building. There are roles that counter build way more often than others. There are some roles that do not counter build at all, ever. Doesn't even come up, not even a thing. So we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna get into it. Make sure you're subscribed. It's super basic. I've been doing this for years. Hit the subscribe button. I should have to tell you guys, but I mean, I don't subscribe to everybody, so I get it. So as you can see, I already have Achilles set up with Achilles build, and we're gonna talk about counter building. And I'm like quotations all day with this, because counter building is more of what are you playing against. It's not like this person built this, so I have to build this. It's not how Smite breaks down. It's more of they have more magical, so I build this and this, or they have more physical, so I build more this and this. And that's all it is. That's all the game comes down to. It is literally that simple. So I have Achilles build popped up. You will start with Axe tier 1, then you will go Flame Forge, which is just HP, right? So you standard. These two won't change. But if you're against a magical in lane, you're not going to want to rush into a Breastplate of Determination. This is a physical defense item. So your brain is processing, hey, I'm not against physical god this game. I'm against a magical god. Let me change my build because of that. And all you will simply do is you will move this item up a slot. Okay, so it's literally that simple. So instead of Void Shield and Breastplate and Oni, you will go Oni here. If I could type, because apparently I can't type. All right, so Oni here, you would go Breastplate here, and you would go Void here. All right, this will just move up your magic defense to an earlier slot, so you're able to box and have a better lane phase against that magical god. Now let's talk about if it's not just one magical god, right? You're against a magical soul laner, it's a Serb, whatever. So Achilles, you're playing Serb. Say they have a magical jungler, say they also have a mage in mid, and maybe instead of 2 physical, you're looking at more magical gods. So say the other team has heavy magic damage. Your magical rolls, mid, ADC, jungle. Those are your damage rolls, magical damage rolls. Or not magical, you're just damage rolls in general. So if 2 of those 3 are of one type of damage, you are going to want to build a little more towards that defense. Common sense, right? There's going to be more of that type of damage in the game, so let me build against that more. So this is you against a magical soul laner. Say they also have a magical jungler and a mage mid, right? Then that Void Shield loses a little bit of value. Yes, this item gives you pen, dope, fantastic. We're not worried about that. We're worried about living and playing around that. So this Breastplate will be moved over again, because we're going to want to deal with those magical gods. Okay, so this is magical solo, magical jungler. You're going to want to build magic here. So you're looking at Genjis. If you want cooldown, this would give you 40% without blue shaman totem buff. You could go into, honestly, any item that you're feeling would help you more. If your team isn't building into a Heart Ward already, then you could build into the Heart Ward amulet and upgrade it into this, and you would be crazy tanky. Now remember, this is magical solo, magical jungle. If the jungle is physical and the mage is mid and there is a magical ADC, right? So now they're on the opposite of the map, you're going to deal with them less. You will swap these two. Why am I doing that? You are doing that to make it so the ganks are not as potent, okay? It's really just that easy. So this would give you magic defense for the soul laner, and then physical defense plus cooldown to deal with the magic solo and the physical jungle ganks. Then you're going into that more magic to deal with the late game team fights where you're grouping. Might seem like a lot, it's really not. You're just kind of altering the order and altering the amount of items of that item type. So in a magic heavy team comp, this is what you would go. So if we jump back to the original build order, we had breastplate here, we had void here, and we had Onis here. So that was just kind of a generic rundown. If you're against all, so if the only damage in the, or sorry, the only type of damage is the support. So if you're against 4 magical and then the support is physical, or against 4 physical and the support is magical, right? So it's heavy in the one type, it's 4 committed, then you're just not gonna worry about that other type of damage. So if it's 4 physical, you would drop this Oni's Hunter's Guard. You would drop it from the build, you would build more physical defense. If your team doesn't have a sovereignty, your team needs this, so you would build this. If your team already has this, you're just looking at any physical item that is helping you. If they have a lot of auto attacks, Midgard. If they have crit and it's annoying, Spectral. It's really gonna come down to what you need. So this would be against a physical heavy comp. You could even change out this Spirit Robe for another physical defense item. You do not have to, but the idea is build heavily against what you're playing against, right? Now, I understand this is a lot of information, but it's actually not super complicated. It's, I'm dealing with X amount of this type of damage, so I'm going to build this many of those items. And that's just a simple breakdown for someone like Achilles and what the solo lane would look like. You could reverse it for a Guardian and do the exact same thing if you're playing a Guardian in solo. Nothing changes. It's just the type, and there's core items that are very strong. You know, Oni's is good. Oni Hunter's Garb is good for magical. You know, Breastplate is good for physical. It's, you just go along those lines with the good items and stick to them. The Heart Ward Amulet and the Sovereignty, I mentioned both of those as must-haves. Those give massive aura defense to your teammates, so they're very good to have when you're grouping. They help your team a lot. They're also really well statted in your favor, and they're super cheap because they're meant for the support. So if your team's not building that, you need to be aware enough to either say, hey, can you build this? They have this many of this type of damage, or you just need to build it. That simple. So that's solo. I'm covering kind of what I would say are the two, like what you're gonna counter build the most, I guess is how I would look at it. The two roles, because warriors are gonna counter build a ton, and then Guardians are gonna counter build a ton, and it's gonna be out of the solo and the support role. So we'll talk about support a little bit. Support is the same kind of thing, except for you mix in a little bit of greed. Essentially, so a normal starter that you're seeing a lot is War Flag. Really all the starters are good, it just depends what you're playing against. So that's right off the rip, we're going to talk about that. So War Banner is more aggressive, right? So if you plan on playing aggressive, you want to, this isn't counter building, it's just, you know, you want to be aggressive against their comp, or you know you're going to be aggressive against their comp. War Banner is going to help towards that. You're going to have the more kind of middle ground and Sentinels. This isn't being built as much. And then you're going to have Heroism. In Benevolence, you're never going Compassion. Heroism. Heroism gives your teammates a shield if they're hard CC'd. So if you're playing against a team comp that has a lot of stuns or hard CCs, that's going to help you. This is going to be very, very valuable. So that would be a counter building aspect to the possibilities of support. Then we're going to go into, if you're playing an aggressive support, you're going Prophetic. If you're playing a defensive support, you're going Gauntlet of Thebes. Prophetic is because you're going to spam more and be in their face. So these are going to be supports that are just very annoying, that you're constantly spamming 1 or 2, or really 2 or 3 damaging abilities. It's going to be something you have to know you can take advantage of. Prophetic on a lot of these guys is super valuable, plus cooldown is very valuable. Then in all the other slots, this is where counter building comes into play. They have a Geb. You're going to want Erosion, right? Erosion is a hard counter to shield. So if they have a Geb, a Nike, a Charon, a Kepri, man, and a Hera, anyone who's got shields, you have to look at their comp and be like, all right, do they have shields? Let me build Erosion early. Erosion is super valuable. It is 100% a must-have against someone like Geb. And if shells are in the game, it becomes even more valuable. This is a very, very important item to go in terms of counter building. So that's just one of those items that you're looking at if you are counter building. Now, I said there was greedy items, selfish items. If you watch some people, they do start to go into a little bit of damage a lot in that role, but that's only when they're consistent with their play. They're not out of position, or they know they can't be killed because they've had a good early game. It really just depends on how the match is playing out. Now, flip side of this, We talked about the solo lane. You're playing a lot of physical or you're playing a lot of magical. That's where that item sovereignty, and I mentioned in solo lane, is super valuable. Sovereignty is going to be good against physical. If you notice, it gives 35 physical prots, plus it's an aura to give 15 more prots to your teammates plus HP 5. So that's a 50 prot item for you and 15 protections for your teammates. So a sovereignty in a slot like this would be super valuable if they're heavy in physical. If they're neutral or middle ground, when I say heavy, I mean there's, you know, four gods are doing physical damage, or maybe 3 if it's their 3 main damaging gods. Same thing goes for magical. If they're heavy magical, then you would look into the Heart Ward amulet and you would upgrade that into the Amulet of Stronghold, give you even more protections, making you just kind of a beast mode tank. Now, let's say it's just a normal game. You don't need to technically counter build against anything. You know, they have a physical solo, a physical jungle, a magic mid, a physical hunter. That's usually pretty normal, very, very common, a magic guardian. So it's kind of like a 3-2 on the damages. You'll just go into a more normal build at this stage. Gauntlet of Thebes can be an option if you're having a good time stacking and you're farming well. This is very strong. This pretty much makes you unkillable. This is a build where you see a lot of people going to a little bit of damage. Don't necessarily recommend it, but something that you'll see a lot is the Chronos Pendant in a slot like this. More general building, less counter building. Not really that important. Once we get further into the game, if the enemy team is building crit, you're going to be looking at getting Spectral Armor. It's an anti-crit item, so that's something that's going to be super valuable, something you're going to want to have. Usually going to be in this 4th and 5th slot where you're throwing around more counter building. Another common item in this slot is the Relic Dagger upgraded into either Bewitched or Eldritched. Bewitched is going to be anti-attack speed. So they have 2 hunters or 2 auto attack gods or 3 auto attack gods. So say there's, I don't know, say they have a normal hunter, they have a Chronos or a Soul or even like a Chiron or somebody in mid, or they have a Mercury in the jungle or a Kali in the jungle or an Arachne in the jungle. That anti-attack speed is going to be super valuable. For Eldritch, it's going to make you tankier when you use your ult. So if you use your ult to engage fights, if you use your ult when... if your ult's important, super valuable to the team fight. So I don't mean like a Kepri ult. I mean more like an Ares ult or a Geb ult. Then Eldritch is going to have a lot of value because it's going to make you super tanky. You also get to see wards. So if you're on an objective, you kind of kill wards sometimes. We don't really talk about that too much. So that's counter building right there. 101. Then like I said, you get into this slot. If they have crit, Spectral. If your team is doing damage or you're playing someone like Athena where you set them up, Stone of Binding. It's going to help you do more damage. So it's not really counter building. It's more of just buffing yourself essentially. If your team is heavy magic damage, you're going to look at an item like Void. And this is a more, it's expensive. It's not really. This is more of a luxury item. This isn't something that's core to your build, but it will help your team do a lot more damage if you're magic heavy. So that's an item you can go in the slot. And then you can be a little more selfish with your final builds, items. You could even go these earlier. A lot of the time, this Void would be the last item. So if you're going for more yourself, if you need cooldown, you could look at getting the Pridwin. If you're against a physical heavy comp, this could be a breastplate instead of the Pridwin. The Pridwin is both magical physical, so it's gonna be good for a neutral comp, or a breastplate more physical heavy. If we're talking magical, then there aren't really a lot of great 20% cooldown items, but you still have the option of going into a Genji's, which is great because your passives get reduced even more by that passive. So in a build like this, you'd still be sitting on 30% cooldown. With the blue shaman totem, would be at 40. With a breastplate or Pridwin in this slot, you'd be at 50. And then your last item is Spectral. So between this and the solo lane, you're seeing like defense is very important when you build it against what you're playing against, rather than just a standard same exact build every game. A lot of the time, your first 2 items, so your starter and your first 2 items in most roles will be the same. It's super common. You'll just consistently run the same stuff, sometimes even into that 3rd item. And then your 4th and 5th, well, I guess your 5th and 6th item become more, what am I playing against? What does my team need? What will help me win this game? Really not that difficult. So those are the 2 hardest roles. I'll be straight with you. Hunters do not counter build. You will not counter build. Biggest thing you can do is make sure if you have 2 hunters on the same team, you both don't go crit. One goes crit, one goes an AA build. So you're both not counter built by Spectral. That's simple. That's not even counter building. That's just something you should know. Hunters will not build anything weird. You will not change your build. You will not go defense. That's not going to happen. I will say, if it's a 4 physical team and you super just want a breastplate, it wouldn't be that weird. You do not really want to do it. It will hurt your damage a lot. It could affect you getting the kills that you normally would get. but it's an option. In reality, you should be able to play around the auras from your support to just be tankier, and you shouldn't need that item. So I will sit here and say hunters will not counter build. It will not happen. Mages, when we get into a mage build, you're not counter building. I don't consider this counter building in the slightest. So say you have a normal, mage build. There's a couple going around right now. There's a book build. There's, I don't know. We'll go through the normal build, and then we'll go through a breastplate build, right? So a normal build would look something like this. You could go Typhons. You could go, let's say, rod or staff, whatever you wanted to go here, and soul gem. So this would be like a standard build. If they have healing, this deso becomes anti-heal. Divine Ruin. That's it. That's your whole counter build. You're done. You've finished. You've cracked the code. That's it. Nothing else to it. There's no more counter building. Now with the other mage build, which is the book build, which I don't know how often you guys see this. It's really only good on 3 or 4 gods. You look at tablet, breastplate is part of this build because you're heavy into magic defense. If I could find breastplate, and then your last 2 items are kind of just what do you need? Like what are you looking for? Right? Like this is like a normal build. So you get to a build like this, you're usually going more power, like a soul reaver here almost every time because it's mana heavy. And then you get to this last slot. This last slot has to be anti-heal if they have healing, and that's it. That's the only part of this build that'll change. So this last slot is up in the air for what you need, whether you make it an obsidian shard or you make it more damage or you make it a soul gem. Whatever you're going for is irrelevant. If they have healing, this becomes Divine Ruin. If they don't have healing, it's whatever you want. That's it. It's never, you don't build defense. This is just a damage item. That's mage counter building. You're not counter building. Then for the last role is assassins. Assassins, once again, I will say this is more counter building than mages, but it's not really counter building. Super uncommon. So say you're playing a god that gets in their face and you don't like CC and stuff interrupts you. Say you're playing something like Surcat. Your core build would be something along the lines of, let's say you go Protector. Protector is really good right now, just overall. Plus, if you do have to counter build or go a hybrid item, it becomes even more valuable. So, say this is your build. Just trying to throw it together real quick. We got Hydras, or we got Heartseeker, and we have Titan Smite. Or let's say a lot of people are still going serrated. We'll say serrated. So, say this is your build. You get to this slot. Usually you would want more pen here to round out that 40% pen, or maybe even one more cooldown or whatever it may be you're looking for in your build. Hydras, whatever item, it doesn't matter. The only counter building is this slot and this slot. So this slot, a lot of the time, even if we're not playing, say we're not playing Surcat, say we're playing someone else, this is a Transcendence. If they have healing, this Transcendence has to turn into a Brawlers. Period. That's it. Now you have anti-heal. That's do they have healing? And when I say do they have healing, I didn't iterate this on the other roles. Do they have a healer of any kind? Do they have a Guan, an Afro, a Hell, a Yamoja? Anyone who's healing like that, then you're building anti-heal. Do they have someone who's building multiple lifesteal items? So Hunter's going double lifesteal, Anubis with multiple lifesteal. Anyone along those lines? Brawlers. Do they have someone with built-in healing into their kit? Achilles, Bastet, anyone along those lines. It doesn't matter. Cerberus, anyone like that, Brawlers, you're building it. Just do it. It's a good item. It's not a great item, but it's a good item. It's not hurting you, and it will help your team, and you win the game, period. And then we get to this last slot. This last, like I said, is usually pen. It's usually damage. We'll say you would have had Hydras in this build. You would have gone it earlier. You would have built it in Heartseeker slots. Let me swap these two, so it's more realistic. So say we go Hydras, and then our last item is Heartseeker. If you are being CC'd a lot, you are dying a lot, whatever it may be, this last item becomes your I need help slot. And if you're doing that, you would drop this. Obviously, you wouldn't have the Heartseeker. That would mean you'd have to plan this. You'd want to plan this ahead. You'd usually want to know it by by these items. Like, hey, they have a lot of CC. I'm struggling, whatever it may be. This item is Heartseeker instead of that Hydras. You will build that instead. You'll be like, hey, it's been kind of hard. They have a lot of CC. This Ymir is stunning me. The Agni's bombing me. I can't get in. The Kukulkan's messing me up. Whatever it is. This item will become Heartseeker. This item will stay serrated. And then you will build one of those help me items. The 2 help me items that I like in the jungle right now. Magi's Blessing. This is a crazy good item. You go into the damage one because they receive 10% more damage. So you're doing a lot more damage. This keeps you alive. It makes you CC immune so you don't have to use beads. It's a really good item. It also gives you cooldown. So it replaces that Hydra's very well. Then in this slot, if they're magic heavy, you could go into a magic defense item. It could be whatever item you want. If you're an auto attack god, you could go Shoguns. Realistically, you probably want Genjis. Genjis is very strong. If they're physical heavy with crit, you will want Spectral. If they're physical heavy just in general, you could pick any of the items you want at that point. Whatever you may need. So say they're for physical damage, you could go Breastplate, which really it would cap you a cooldown. Wouldn't be a bad item. You go Midgard if they're heavy on auto attacks and they aren't going crit. You could go Void Shield. Is great. Void Shield would be amazing. It would give you more of that missing pen. That's your counter build. It's not crazy. Notice it's same with jungle as most of the other roles. Your core build stays the same. It's just like, hey, I'm dealing with this game, so I have to build one of these 2 items. I'm dealing with this game, so I have to build one of these 2 items. The items I've said are pretty much the only items you'd ever build. It's rare. That's why I'm in quotations for jungle counter building. Anti-heal is super common. Building this Void Shield or Magi's or anything in this slot is very rare. It's not common. It doesn't happen. You could do it as much as you want. Get a feel for the damage loss that you receive. Survivability goes up though, so get a feel for that. 100% up to you. So that's counter building in Smite. 21 minutes to cover it. I probably introed for like a minute. So 20 minutes to cover every role and counter building. It's not that serious. It's not that intricate. And if you aren't doing it, you usually won't lose the game. It usually will not cause you to lose the game. The anti-heal will cause you to lose the game. That's something that as playing the game, as someone who's played the game forever, you feel that the second you should have had anti-heal in a fight and you're like, oh, I lost because of that. Build the anti-heal. Just help you and your team and make the games more fun. Just build the anti-heal. You'll get more kills. Your team will get more kills. You'll win more fights. It's just better to do it. So hopefully this video helps you. Hopefully it's not too complicated. I know it's a lot of information, but it's actually not like crazy detailed information. It's pretty basic. If you have any other videos like this, or not even like this, any other video ideas that you would like to see or you feel like haven't been done and need to be done, let me know. Put it in the links below. I know a lot of people are like, well, Smite 2 is coming soon, blah, blah, blah. We aren't even in the alpha, the closed alpha of Smite 2 yet, which they said is going to be like a weekend, a month. So I think we're ways out till we get like real full-blown Smite 2 and the content around it, to be completely honest with you, where even I'm playing it like super regularly. So I want to stick with Smite content. I'll make sure you guys are having a good last year of Smite 1 before Smite 2 starts.